My name is Sarah, and what I'm about to share happened during my very first shift as a psychiatric nurse at Millbrook State Hospital in upstate New York. I'd completed my training, passed all my certifications, and felt as prepared as anyone could be for working in mental health care. The orientation materials covered crisis intervention, medication protocols, patient safety procedures, and de-escalation techniques. They taught us about schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe depression, and personality disorders. What they didn't prepare me for was encountering something that defied every psychological framework I'd learned. This isn't a story about traditional mental illness, though. It's about a patient who seemed to know things that were impossible to know, who whispered predictions that came true with disturbing accuracy. It's about the 3 weeks that made me question everything I thought I understood about the human mind, and the reason I eventually left psychiatric nursing altogether. It was October 15th, 2019, and I was assigned to Ward C, the acute care unit for patients experiencing severe psychological episodes. The ward housed 24 beds arranged in a horseshoe configuration around a central nursing station. Each room was designed for safety with reinforced windows, furniture bolted to the floor, and emergency call systems monitored around the clock. The walls were painted a calming sage green, though the fluorescent lighting gave everything an institutional pallor that no amount of color theory could overcome. My supervisor, charge nurse Patricia Valdez, had been working at Millbrook for 18 years. She had the kind of steady, unflappable demeanor that comes from seeing every possible manifestation of human psychological distress. During our walkthrough, she explained the patient roster, medication schedules, and the particular challenges each individual presented. Most of the patients were dealing with conditions I recognized from my textbooks. Room 304 housed Marcus, a young man experiencing his first manic episode who hadn't slept in 4 days, and spoke rapidly about revolutionary business ideas. Room 318 was home to Elena, an elderly woman with severe depression who rarely spoke and spent most of her time staring out the window. Room 312 contained David, whose paranoid delusions convinced him that government agents were monitoring his thoughts through the television. Then Patricia stopped outside room 309. The patient inside was listed on the chart as Vincent Torino, age 47, admitted 6 days earlier following what the intake notes described as a complete psychological break. He'd been found by police walking naked through downtown Albany at 3 in the morning, speaking in what witnesses described as different voices. No family members had been located, and he carried no identification when discovered. What made Vincent unusual wasn't his presenting symptoms, though those were certainly concerning. It was the series of incidents that had occurred since his admission, incidents that had left the day shift staff visibly shaken and requesting transfers to other units. According to Patricia's report, Vincent rarely spoke during normal interactions. He would respond to basic questions about his needs, accept medication without resistance, and follow instructions from staff. But periodically, usually in the early morning hours, he would begin whispering to himself in his room. The night shift nurses reported that these whispered conversations seemed to be directed at someone, though Vincent was always alone. The content of these whispers was what disturbed everyone. On his second night, Vincent was heard whispering about a car accident involving a red sedan and a delivery truck at the intersection of Madison and 3rd Street. The next morning, local news reported exactly such an accident had occurred at 6:47 a.m., killing the driver of the sedan. Vincent had been locked in his room since midnight with no access to television, radio, or any external information source. On his 4th night, Vincent whispered about a fire at an elementary school that would force the evacuation of 300 children. That afternoon, a gas leak at Roosevelt Elementary required the emergency evacuation of the entire school. No fire occurred, but the whispered prediction had been specific enough to unnerve the staff who heard it. The most disturbing incident happened on his 6th night, just hours before my first shift began. Vincent was heard whispering about Janet Morrison, the night nurse who had been caring for him. He described in precise detail how Janet would receive a phone call at 2:17 a.m., informing her that her estranged brother had died in a motorcycle accident in Phoenix, Arizona. He whispered about how she would drop her coffee mug, how it would shatter on the floor of the break room, and how she would need to call her supervisor to leave early. At exactly 2:17 a.m., Janet's phone rang. The call was from a Phoenix hospital. Her brother, whom she hadn't spoken to in 3 years, had been killed in a motorcycle accident. She dropped her coffee mug in the break room and it shattered across the linoleum floor. She called Patricia at home and requested emergency leave. Janet had worked at Millbrook for 12 years and had never mentioned her brother to any of her colleagues. The personnel files contained no information about her family members. There was no conceivable way Vincent could have known about her brother's existence, let alone predicted the circumstances of his death with such accuracy. When I asked Patricia how she explained these incidents, she looked at me with the weary expression of someone who had stopped trying to rationalize the impossible. "I've been in psychiatric care for nearly 2 decades," she said, adjusting her badge on her scrubs. "I've seen patients with remarkable intuition, people who seemed unusually perceptive about others' emotional states. I've worked with individuals who claimed psychic abilities, though those claims never proved accurate under scrutiny. But Vincent is different. He's not making predictions or claiming supernatural powers. He's having conversations with someone we can't see, and those conversations contain information that turns out to be true." She paused, looking through the reinforced glass window into Vincent's room where he sat quietly on his bed staring at his hands. The day shift requested reassignment after Janet's incident. 3 nurses with over 40 years of combined experience asked to be transferred rather than continue caring for him. "That's why you're starting on nights, Sarah. We need someone fresh, someone who hasn't been influenced by the fear that's taken hold of the other staff." "Idai." As Patricia spoke, I found myself studying Vincent through the observation window. He appeared completely ordinary, a middle-aged man with graying hair and unremarkable features. His medical chart indicated no history of head trauma, no neurological abnormalities, and no family history of psychiatric illness. Blood work had revealed no substances that might explain his condition. Brain scans showed normal structure and function. He looked up suddenly, his eyes meeting mine through the glass. For a moment, I felt an inexplicable chill, as if something cold had settled in my chest. Vincent smiled slightly, then returned his attention to his hands. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he had been expecting me. Patricia finished her briefing and left me with the night shift supervisor, Marcus Chen, a soft-spoken man in his early 30s who had been working psychiatric nursing for 8 years. Marcus had a calming presence that seemed essential for managing the overnight hours when patients often experienced their most difficult symptoms. "Vincent's different during the day," Marcus explained as we walked toward the nursing station. "Almost normal, if you can call anything about this situation normal. He eats his meals, takes his medications, even makes small talk with the orderlies. But something changes after midnight. It's like he becomes a different person entirely." Marcus showed me the incident reports from the previous nights, each one documenting Vincent's whispered conversations with meticulous detail. The nursing staff had begun recording the times and content of these episodes, creating a disturbing log of predictions that consistently proved accurate. "We've tried everything," Marcus continued, pulling up Vincent's treatment plan on the computer, increased his evening medications, moved him to different rooms, even tried having staff maintain constant visual contact. Nothing stops the whispering, and nothing explains how he knows what he knows. I spent the first few hours of my shift familiarizing myself with the other patients, checking on their needs and administering medications. The ward was quieter than I'd expected, with most patients sleeping or resting in their rooms. The only sounds were the soft hum of ventilation systems and the occasional shuffle of staff footsteps on the polished floors. Around 11 p.m., I began my regular room checks, a procedure required every hour throughout the night shift. I saved Vincent's room for last, partly from curiosity and partly from the nervous energy that had been building since Patricia's briefing. When I approached room 309, Vincent was sitting upright on his bed, fully awake and staring directly at the door as if he'd been expecting me. This struck me as odd, since the other patients were typically drowsy from their evening medications by this time. Good evening, Vincent, I said, keeping my voice professional but warm. I'm Sarah, your night nurse. How are you feeling tonight? You're nervous, Vincent replied, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. You've heard about the things I say and you're wondering if they're true. I felt my pulse quicken. Vincent's tone wasn't threatening or hostile, but there was something unsettling about his directness. Most psychiatric patients, especially those experiencing acute episodes, didn't demonstrate such clear awareness of staff concerns. I'm here to make sure you're comfortable and have everything you need, I responded, following the de-escalation techniques I'd learned in training. Is there anything I can get for you? Vincent studied my face for a moment before answering. You should call your sister tomorrow morning. She's going to need someone to talk to. The statement hit me like cold water. I hadn't mentioned having a sister to anyone at the hospital. My personnel file contained emergency contact information, but it only listed my parents. My sister Emma and I had a complicated relationship, and I rarely discussed her with colleagues or friends. What did you say? I asked, trying to keep the surprise out of my voice. Your sister Emma, Vincent continued, his eyes never leaving mine. She's going to get some news tomorrow that's going to upset her. She'll need someone who understands what it's like to start over in a new place. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. Emma lived 3 states away and we hadn't spoken in 2 months. There was no possible way Vincent could know her name or anything about her circumstances. Yet something in his tone suggested he wasn't guessing or making random statements. How do you know about my sister? I asked, abandoning my professional demeanor momentarily. Vincent tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. She tells me things, he said simply, about people who matter to the people she meets. She wants me to help when I can. She tells you? Who tells you? The lady who sits in the corner, Vincent said, gesturing toward an empty space near the window. She's been here longer than any of us. She knows things about this place, about the people who work here, about what's coming. I looked toward the corner where Vincent had pointed, seeing nothing but shadows cast by the hallway lights. The rational part of my mind insisted that Vincent was experiencing hallucinations, a common symptom of various psychiatric conditions. But the specific accuracy of his previous predictions made it difficult to dismiss his words entirely. What does she look like, this lady? I asked, curious about the nature of his apparent hallucination. Old-fashioned dress, gray hair pulled back tight. She has kind eyes but a sad expression, like she's seen too much suffering in this place. She died here a long time ago, back when they did different things to patients. Worse things. That conversation with Vincent was 15 years ago, but I still remember every word. I did call Emma the next morning, and yes, she needed someone to talk to about the divorce papers she'd just been served. I never told her why I called. Some things are better left unexplained. Vincent disappeared from Millbrook 3 days later, simply walking out during a shift change when no one was watching. He was never found. I transferred to pediatric nursing the following month and never looked back. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if there are others like Vincent out there, whispering truths that nobody wants to hear.